Good morning. Welcome again to Morning Devotions, and thank you again so much for our time together. I look forward to seeing you on all the campuses today, at South Campus and East Campus and Main Campus, as we get back into Acts chapter 17. And, you know, they tell me that there's over 60,000 people every week that watch us on our live feed that goes out around the world. So for all of you 60,000 plus people that are watching our services by live feed in Europe and Norway and Sweden and Canada and Australia and Singapore, God bless you. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow also. But right now I want us to go back to the book of Psalms. There's a very encouraging thought I want to share with you today. I'm a prosperity preacher, and I'm an unashamed prosperity preacher. I refuse to be ashamed of preaching the truths of prosperity because some people have abused it. I'm a pastor. I teach prosperity in a way that people can live it. I'm not interested in Mercedes-Benzes and Cadillacs and airplanes. I'm interested in food on people's tables and a home for them to live in and good educations for the children, our needs met, and an abundance left over for every good work. That's prosperity. And it doesn't just come by giving. Giving's a piece of it. Tithing's a piece of it, but so is hard work, discipline, savings. He who gathers money little by little makes it grow. It's a whole lot of truth in here. Now, one of the truths of prosperity that is often ignored is, where do you look for your source? Where do you look for your source? In Psalms 104, verse 27, these all look to you. You give them their food at the proper time. When you give it to them, they gather it up. When you open their hand, they are satisfied with good things. 35 years ago, Sister Bev and I left the United States, 23 years old. To be honest, didn't know enough to be scared about what we were doing. Came to Asia and really never went back. This has been our home ever since. In our youth, we just figured God provided for us, and God will always provide for us. We've never looked to denominations for support. We've never looked to others for support. We've looked to God. Now, I teach that to young pastors. I teach that to Pinoy pastors, that we don't have to look to America or Saudi or someplace else for money. Look to God. When God opens His hand, you will be satisfied with good things. But I need to teach that to businessmen today also. Who do you look to? Do you look to relatives when you need capital? Do you look to, where do you look? When you and I have a need, we have to decide, where do we look? Now, I know this is so simplistic that it almost seems as if I'm being redundant, and if I'm redundant, please forgive me, but let me say it again. Where do we look? As a pastor, do we look to the members for our provision, or do we look to God? As a businessman, do you look to investors for your provision, or do you look to God? Do you look to corruption for your provision, or do you look to God? Each one of us in our lives has to come to a place where we don't look to the company we work for as our provider. Because please forgive me, San Miguel, and you may have worked for them for 30 years, they're not your provider. God is your provider. The company that you work for, Accenture or whatever company you can think of, Ayala Corporation, one of the best run corporations they say in the world, they're not your provider. Now, as a Christian, we have to come to a place in life where the paycheck that we receive is nice, that's beautiful. But the company is not our source. A pastor cannot look to the congregation as their source of provision. A pastor cannot look overseas for their source of provision. A man who works for a company cannot look to that company as the source of his provision. As a businessman, you cannot look to the banks and to investors as the source of your provision. Each one of us must learn to look to God. To look to God. When God gives it to us, we gather it up. When God opens His hand, we are satisfied with good things. I challenge you today. Whether I'm talking to a pastor, whether I'm talking to a man who gets up and goes to work every day at a company, whether I'm talking to a young businessman, whether I'm talking to an old businessman, understand the source of your provision in your heart must always be God. Every day in your devotion, Lord, give us this day our daily bread. That is praying for your provision in advance.